Can conflicts be productive at work? Hello and welcome to Communication Psychology. My name is Gerhard. I'm a psychologist from Hamburg, Germany, specialized in communication psychology in international, intercultural, and multilanguage contexts. Recently, I came across some TED Talks, the main idea being conflicts can be productive if they force the participant to engage with each other's ideas. So the outcome being a much more creative and innovative solution. Now, your immediate reaction to the topic may be conditioned by your personality and by your culture. There are personality types that prefer to avoid conflict. For example, if you are high on agreeableness on the Big Five personality inventory or on neuroticism, then you tend to prefer not to engage in conflicts. The same if you are from a more collectivistic culture, because conflicts represent a threat to the group cohesion, and you also want to save face, your own and of the others. In more individualistic cultures, you may be more prone to engage in a disagreement publicly. In a boardroom, for example, in the Netherlands, it's probably more customary to express disagreement and to tell somebody very bluntly that his idea is quite stupid than in Vietnam or Korea. Now, what does the science actually say? Well, the first reaction I had coming from social psychology is that, well, on the one hand, there's research showing from decades ago that typically, if there is a conflict, people do not take the opponent's ideas and integrate them into their own thinking. What typically happens is that the two combatants in an argument become more and more polarized. So you may know this from your personal experience with your spouse or with your children. If you start getting into an argument, typically people do not accept the opponent's arguments and come to a creative solution on their own. What typically happens is everybody becomes more adamant and more emotional about his or her position. So you start selectively choosing information in favor of your position, and you try to attack the opponent's position. So that's the first reaction. And then the other reaction is, in social psychology, there is the phenomena of groupthink, where people, for the sake of group cohesion, do not manifest criticism, doubts, and after some failure, after some tragedy often, then people discover that they had disagreements before, but they were not voicing them because they wanted to keep the group together. So this would be in favor of allowing conflict. Now, how are such things settled nowadays? Via so-called meta-analysis that combine often more than 100 individual studies. Actually, researchers try to find all the existing studies, even unpublished dissertations, and integrate them in one calculation. Now, the problem in general in psychology, in many areas with numerical data, is that they say something about group differences, but not about the concrete individual. So even if on average it should turn out that Italians consume more pasta than Swedes, if that is true on average, it doesn't mean if you meet a concrete Italian that he may not even dislike pasta. And the same here, even if the research shows that under certain circumstances conflict may be productive, it doesn't mean that that's the case for your concrete conflict. Now, there are three types of conflict studied in the research literature. Personal or interpersonal conflict is when you have personal dislikes among the team. They are typically negatively correlated to productivity. task conflicts are conflicts about what and how it should be done. For example, if you decide you want to do a team building activity, there may be a big argument over should we practice with the whole team one day rugby or American football, or should we do some creative activity like improvisational dancing, or should we do a retreat in a Buddhist monastery, or even should we engage in mountain climbing. Now, this is a task conflict here. Under certain circumstances, it's actually productive. It can be productive because we want to avoid groupthink, and we want to find a creative, innovative solution. And to get creative solutions, we need to have more ideas, a clash of ideas, and you need also to find arguments against counter arguments. So the final outcome should be expected to be much more solid because it passed the test of rigorous debate. Now, the third type of conflicts are process conflicts. So you established you want to do some team building activity in a Buddhist monastery, but you don't agree who is responsible for what and how it should actually be organized. Now, also as with the personal conflicts, process conflicts tend to be not good for productivity. Now, looking at task conflicts, you also need to have a look at different types of tasks. There can be a creativity task, coming up with new solutions. There can be a decision task where you have different options and need to evaluate which is the best option. Then you have production tasks that represent routine physical or intellectual labor. And you have so-called project tasks where you need to plan, and so you implement a given plan. Now, conflicts tend to be negatively correlated with production tasks, so that is with routines, and you may understand why. So if you're working in a shop with a certain routine, or you're an accountant and you have certain operations going on, starting a debate whether you should use this or that accounting program, or how you should code different entries, it's probably not very productive. It's the same as if crossing the street with my two little boys. While crossing the street, we engage in some kind of argument how we should cross the street. Now we have a very concrete task at hand that we need to absorb it. The same here also with the accounting. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have debate, conflict about some general frameworks about your activities. You could discuss whether the routines are optimal, but not during those tasks, of course. Now, the most important thing to understand is in communication psychology, there is a so-called law, and it states that conflicts or disturbances during a conversation should be addressed. They have priority. So if you're engaging in some kind of group discussion or meeting, and you feel there is some disturbance in the room, some underlying conflict, you should address it. Because if you read now that conflicts are negative, like personal conflicts are negative at work, well, this doesn't mean that they shouldn't be addressed. And this also doesn't mean that conflicts should be repressed. They should be kept under the carpet, because that is still a conflict. It's a frozen conflict. It's under the surface, but it's still a conflict. So conflicts actually need to be addressed. And now here we clash with some modern corporate ideas, for example, of like positive psychology. Maybe we need to have a good feeling at the workplace. And for many people, positive psychology, even if they didn't study it or have a positive work atmosphere, automatically means self-censorship. And then people tend to be very nice, smiling, but they have lots and lots of conflicts under the surface. And this doesn't mean that you don't have the conflict anymore. So they should be addressed. And typically there's much to be gained in finishing them, because everybody has a position that wants to be heard, a voice that wants to be heard. Now, we'll talk about how to solve or moderate group conflicts later on this podcast, on this show. If you have concrete questions and ideas, please write me. If you want me to give a free presentation on communication psychology in your company every month, I have 4 international slots. You can apply and you send me an email and we see if we can arrange a suitable time. Now, a small task for the next week. Now think about those 3 types of conflict, like personal conflict, task conflict, and process conflict, and just brainstorm, make a list of those 3 types at work. What kind of problems, conflicts do we have? And then also think which of those conflicts is openly expressed and which of those conflicts is under the surface. Maybe there are things you would like to address, but you are not doing it because of a fear that it might disturb the group. Now, I hope this was useful. See you next week. Bye-bye.